look at it, and then she gets inside and she slowly works her way, like a little bit here, a little bit there, and then next thing you know, she's out playing with everything, touching everything, but she has to start by saying, no, I don't like it.
Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Brian, and this is Laura, and together we're part of the Horror Tours. We are Northwest Indiana, Chicagoland haunt reviewers, and so we're going to talk a little bit today about what makes a great haunt, or at least what, in our opinion, makes a great haunt. As we all know, it's subjective. But we're going to try to give a few guidelines, at least as to what we look for, kind of give you an idea of what we think. Over the years, we've found makes an interesting haunt of all types. A little bit about us. As soon as I turn my pointer on it, it doesn't really work when it's on. About us, as I mentioned, we're the Horror Tours. We've been haunt fans, like I'm sure everybody in the audience, for many years. And we've been going to haunts for a lot of years. We've been reviewing haunts informally in one form or another since about 2001. And we've been an online presence since about 2009 or so. And we visit over 100 haunts per year in one way or another, mostly during September/October, beginning of November, but sometimes at other times of the year as well. The most important thing, though, is we're fans. We're not professional paid haunt reviewers. We don't work for a specific haunt. We don't work for any specific organization. We view haunts as fans would view haunts, and that's what we try to bring to everybody else. So why review haunts? Well, it's fun, for one thing, but anybody who goes to a haunt's a reviewer, because everybody's got an opinion. And so haunts depend on that kind of thing. They like to hear feedback from people, and even if people only talk amongst themselves, they're pretty much reviewers of haunts in one way or another. And as I mentioned before, what makes a great haunt is really subjective. It depends on the individual, it depends on what they like, their level of tolerance, etc., personal taste. So what we thought about characteristics that we like, and we thought we'd share them with everybody else. So how do you judge? That's another obvious question. We feel that haunts, particularly home haunts and yard displays, which we do a lot of every year, they're really labors of love. The people that put them together, they really invest a lot of time and effort in doing this and putting on a good show. But we also realize that not everybody has the same resources, time, etc., to put into it. So the point is that not all haunts should be judged in the same way, because they're not all the same. Professional haunts also differ widely, as anybody who goes to haunts knows. There are some haunts that have small size, large size, professional sets, homemade sets, all of that. And all that really should be taken into account. One of the things that's really important, we try to avoid haunt elitism. That is, viewing every haunt through the same lens. Oh, this haunt isn't as good as that haunt, or this haunt doesn't have as great a set design as this haunt does. We try to not view haunts in that way. So we came up with a set of criteria that we kind of use as guidelines. But before we get to that, I just want to briefly talk about some of the things we really kind of don't like in various haunts. One of the things, and I know this is one of Laura's specific things, that she doesn't like poor patron flow.
Right.
And why is that?
Because sometimes if there's too many people in there, you get in groups and then you're stuck, you can't move, it gives you a claustrophobic feeling. So me particularly, I don't like that, because sometimes you don't like that feeling trapped, feeling in it. And then you miss a lot of the scares, because if there's too many people in there, the actors are scared one set, but you're behind, and then it's done, so you kind of miss out on a lot of the haunt.
But I'm sure a lot of people in the audience have been to haunts where they herd you through like cattle, and you kind of get into the room, and boo, you see the scare, but you don't really see it because there are 25 people in front of you, and you just sort of hear it, and the scare's not reset by the time you're through that room. So it's something of that nature that's not really that great. Another thing is actors who are unprepared, or the flip side of it, who are too prepared. I'll explain what I mean by that. Now, unprepared, obviously actors who really, they seem like they want to be somewhere else. To give you an example, went to a haunt several years ago, professional haunt. It was a haunted trail. We were being guided around by two guides. So we were walking a specific path following these guides, and we came upon 4 or 5 actors, masks off, smoking and joking. They're all chatting with each other. The guides walked us right to the middle of them, and one of the guys turns to me and says, "Oh, are you guys part of a group? Oh, wait a minute." And they all stop, put up their cigarettes, and they get the masks on, and they go, "Hi." Well, I mean, it's a little bit late by that point. So that kind of thing is what we're talking about, actors unprepared. We're certainly not talking about actors who aren't as great as other actors. It's actors who are like, I'd rather be somewhere else. And the flip side of that are those actors that are overzealous. And Laura really gets the brunt of this, because she's short.
I'm target for that.
Okay? we talk about actors who get in your face, which is expected at some points, obviously, but then they don't get out of your face, right?
They won't let you go past and they'll block, and I'm always the target, you know, because I'm small.
Yeah, they get her all the time.
And then, they won't let me pass, and I'm just, you know, they won't, and I don't like that. First it's okay, I mean, fine, but don't take it too far, I don't like that, and I can't pass.
Exactly, and when you get to the point, when you really get to the point where you have to ask the actor, you know, can you please move? Maybe that's a little bit too much. Repetitious comments. This is one thing that we kind of see a lot here and there. We call it the get out factor. And why is that? Because every room you go into, they scream at you and say, get out.
Get out! Yeah, every room the same.
I mean, it's not a big deal. Of course, you expect every haunt to be different, but we like to see a little bit of variety. One of my pet peeves is extending the haunt length with superfluous segments. So segments that really have no point to them. I'll give you an example. I went to a haunt, again, a professional haunt, not that long ago. We went to a room, there was a guy there, wasn't dressed up as an actor or anything like that. It wasn't the rules room where they're reading us the rules or anything. Just this guy starts talking to us, insulting us as actors often do, you know, when you're in a haunted house, and made us do some silly things like turn around and make funny noises and all that kind of thing, and they just let us go. And it had nothing to do with patron flow because we were the only ones in the haunt at the time, so it was just one of those things where it was killing time. It really didn't seem to be much point to it. Kind of thing can get dull, especially if it happens multiple times in a haunt. And then, excessive dark mazes. This right here is one of my personal pet peeves because it involves a lot of things. Obviously, dark mazes are part of haunts. We like dark corridors, we like twisty corridors, things where you can actually be in the dark, but you still kind of have a vague idea of where you're going. But the idea is when the dark maze becomes the haunt, in other words, you're in there and you don't know where you're at, and you have to get to the point where you're feeling along the wall like this, and you're worried, you wind up running into people in front of you, people behind you, you get lost, all of that kind of thing, and then it becomes a safety issue too. So sometimes things like that can be a little bit of a downer. But we're not here to talk about what we don't like. This is it. We're here to talk about what we like.
Georgia, can I ask you a question?
Yes, sir.
What about having a dark maze as a portion of it?
Absolutely. And I will reiterate that any haunt that has a dark maze or several dark corridors or even a little twist in there, that's fine.
That's fine.
What we really have an issue with, and it happens once in a while, is where you get big, huge segments of complete darkness and with a lot of twisty turns and corridors and dead ends, and you have no idea where you're at.
Yeah.
And especially when you start running into other people, that's really where we think, okay, you know, this is enough now. I'll give you one quick example. When we went to a haunt, this was probably 4 years ago, the haunt was a local haunt, not a big, huge professional one, but it was only about 5 minutes long, okay, the haunt itself. So we thought, you know, it's not that great, but it wasn't that expensive, you know, no big deal. But we thought, is it worth going back there again? Well, the next year they had new owners, and the new owners said, we've doubled the length of the haunt. And we thought, well, okay, all right, we'll give it a try, because we always give haunts more than one try. There's no point in writing them off, because haunts are different every year. Well, they did double the haunt, but the second half of it was all dark maze. Empty dark maze where you didn't know where you were going, and that's it. So, yes, technically the haunt was doubled, but there was nothing to see, nor anything to do. So that's just an example, something to talk about. All right, haunt types. We're going to talk about 3 different haunt types today. Pay haunts, obviously, that's the easiest one to define. They're haunts that charge a fee. Okay, so they could be haunts anywhere from the big conglomerates that are around, professional sets, etc., to your local JC's haunt, your church haunts, seasonal haunts, things of that nature. And we also have home haunts. Haunts on people's private property that have some kind of walkthrough. Usually in their garage or their purpose-built structures for the season, that kind of thing. They may or may not have live actors, although most of them do. And then they usually work in conjunction with a yard display itself. And then finally, we're talking about yard displays. Yard displays are, what the name implies, a bunch of props on somebody's lawn, a display. Okay? And yes, anything can be a yard display, but for our purposes, it's a little bit more than 2 tombstones on your lawn. Yeah, of course. No walkthrough, but they can have live actors, and a lot of them do sometimes on the weekends. So there are all sorts of different types. All right. Our rating criteria, just to briefly go through these, we kind of go through 6 different things that we come up with, that we kind of look at for different haunts. The first one is the amount of decoration / scenery. And obviously, this varies with your location, what resources you have, et cetera, et cetera. There's not a grading scale of, if you have this many tombstones in your yard, you get an 8 out of 10. It's nothing like that. It's just, that's something we look at. Another thing is effective use of space. How well do you use the space that you have? Third one, scare factor, very subjective. And we'll define this a little bit more later, but right now this is what we think about. Actor enthusiasm, and then we've got originality and uniqueness. And then finally, for pay haunts only, obviously value for the money. If it's free, it's a pretty good value.
Right.
So one or more of these could always apply. All right, so we'll give you some examples of each of the criteria that we're talking about. And the first one, amount of decorations. Really depends on the type of haunt, as I talked about, the location, the available space that you have. The type of scenery and decorations are also important, so creativity matters. And what we mean by that is, anybody can go to the store and buy a bunch of props. That's not a bad thing, don't get me wrong. I just want to be clear that anything we're saying here is just our own subjective opinion. We like everything, really we do. If we can, but I just want to point out that the more creative you are, hey, you get noticed, that kind of thing. And of course, too much is not always good. You don't just want to have props jammed in everywhere either, because you kind of want to give somebody an experience, something enjoyable. Should be fun and engaging, with a variety or theme that runs through it. Those are the kind of things we look for. First example we have, Canyon Trail Cemetery. This is an example of a yard display. Very creative yard display. It's on a corner lot, L-shaped lot. It's got a lot of different scenes thematically, a lot of pneumatics and such as this right here. This is homemade. The pneumatics are homemade. The designs are homemade by the owners. Great stuff. This picture doesn't do it justice because it's moving right now. It's a whimsical yard display. It's fun for the kids. It's fun for adults. Got a lot of different things in there. Things like this. This tombstone here for Elizabeth Bathory, the Bloody Countess who used to bathe in the blood of virgins to keep herself young. In red with water running down, looks like blood. Nice little touch, things like that. Each of these sections are clearly delineated. You can see one section to the other. Here's a scene of a bunch of witches, for example. And as I mentioned, all of these are in motion all the time. There's animatronics and pneumatics going on all the time throughout all of these displays. So it's a fun thing to look at. There's so much to see here. These are some of these singing jack-o'-lanterns where they sing and they're projected on there. This is an example of fun activities, which is always great. And we have another example of a jack-o'-lantern, another handmade prop right there. That one happens to be static, I believe, but there are many, many that move. So this is a great one. Another one is Shirley House of the Dead. This is out in Orland Park, Illinois. This is another house. They do use a lot of store-bought props, but they put things together very well. This is a big house. They have a lot of windows. They have a long walkway that goes up to the front. They have a walkway out in the front here too, and they managed to decorate everything in some way or another. There's always something to see within this property. This is another one that's fun for the children as well. They do have live actors on occasion too. You can see here are some of their props on their lawn. This trip is a feature that you see all the time. It's one of the features of the haunt. And over here in the windows, they have displays that move as well. Even skeletons there up on the wall. Another portion of this display is this crypt right here that I mentioned. Okay, this is a very large crypt section, and this character in here is always different every year. This is from last year. It's some sort of melting man type of thing, but it's always a different type of character as well. Very elaborate. These windows here are always reflecting different designs, sometimes things that are very esoteric, like one year it was a 1920s wake scene in there. Very interesting hand-designed type of thing. Kind of neat to see. You go back there multiple times and you can see different things all the time. And this is one of the original props there. This is the Tower of Terror. This display used to be called the Tower of Terror years ago, before it became Shirley House of the Dead, and this is part of the original setup right there, that tower that's on the other side of the garage. Okay, Hills of Unrest. This is another example of some good decorations. Hills of Unrest is out in New Lenox, Illinois. Has smaller space than the previous two that we talked about, but they still do some good things with their decorations. So Hills of Unrest has a church theme. You can see the house is always done up like an abandoned church, and here's the churchyard here. This caretaker is a central character. He's there every year, kind of their central point. But there are other things, little bits that make it interesting, and especially this. This is one of my favorite things. This is the bell tower on top of the house. And this picture, of course, doesn't show movement, but these skeletons here are suspended and they fly around this bell tower. And it's really kind of neat. It's neat, and it's a nice use of something that's obviously not part of the house, and it's purpose-built. Another thing that they do that is pretty neat is these characters in motion. You see a lot of these. I just gave one example here, but you can see here, this guy's getting impaled on a chainsaw right there, and it looks like you're right in the moment when you get up there. So you see this a lot. There are several characters like that in this display. Additionally, you've got some whimsical elements too. You've got this guy reading ghost stories to the children. And for fans of Universal Horror in the background, we've got Lawrence Talbot, Larry Talbot, the original werewolf. Tombstone, nice little touch. And then, also for fans of Universal, in the background lurking, you've got the Frankenstein monster coming out of the crypt too. So, and these pictures give the impression that there's a lot of yard space here, but there really isn't. This has got much less space than some haunts might have. And speaking of space, effective use of space, this is another criterion that we look at. It doesn't matter how much space you have, though. It really matters what you do with it. Because, for example, haunts in Chicagoland around Midway Airport area, there are very little yard space there. So we see haunts that make really effective use of that. They don't have half an acre in their front lawn like some other people do. So we kind of look at what you do with the space. And also haunts that use the natural environment of the haunt. So you have a haunt in an old creepy abandoned building and you use that to great effect. Or you have a haunt that incorporates some kind of natural trail environment or wooded environment or something and you use that. It's great. Sometimes it only takes one thing to make a haunt stand out. And here's an example. This is probably the most extreme example of creative use of space that we've seen, and this is Spirit Parlor de-balcony. And as the name might imply, it's on a balcony. In fact, it's on a third-floor balcony of a little apartment building in Crestwood, also Illinois. This is third floor, okay, and this is probably about, I don't know, 15 feet, maybe by 5 feet or something like that. It's about 75 square feet of space. It's not a lot. This picture doesn't do it justice because you're very far away, but you can see here there are instruments suspended in midair. There's a chair that's suspended on the side. It's as if you interrupted this seance in progress, and the spirits have taken over. That's the idea. Also, I'll point out that every year the theme is different. This was from 2014. Last year it was Mausoleum de-balcony, and they had a mausoleum there. And 2 years ago, 2013, or 3 years ago now, it was cemetery de-balcony. So it's always something de-balcony. Monsters on Morris. Now this is a small area in Homewood, Illinois, down a little side street. They don't have a huge yard. The theme of this one is coffins, full-size coffins. They have at least half a dozen full-size coffins here in this display. And it doesn't look crowded. It looks very effective the way they do it. Not a lot of front yard space, okay? There's really not much more than what you see here and along the side. But they managed to get things in there like this little mini mausoleum. They also have, as we mentioned, the coffins. So here's an example of one. You got the wooden coffin right here. And then if you look at the next picture, this is half a coffin right here. And it looks like it's been used too. We don't really ask too much. And then in the background there are these ghostly pallbearers, and there's a full-size coffin, which you'll see better in the next picture. And this one really looks like it's been underground. Okay, the blue light kind of reflects off of it. If you see it in person, it's rusty. It looks like it's been under the ground. So it's better not to ask, really. But, so this is down a side street, and it's quiet. And when you go there at night with the blue light, it's really quite effective. And so when you go there, the key is, because they use the space effectively, you're not thinking, well, there's not a lot there. Okay, you look at it and say, wow, that's pretty interesting. And that's really the goal. Now here's an example of using natural environment. Winding Creek Haunted Woods. This was a home haunt. Unfortunately, it's not going on anymore. But this was a home haunt out in Plainfield, Illinois. And this was a private property that bordered a creek, hence the name, Winding Creek Haunted Woods. And it incorporated a bunch of things. It incorporated a trail that went all the way through the property, along the creek, various scenes that you see like here, for example. These pictures don't do it a lot of justice because they have many, many actors that hide in the natural environment, jump out at you, a lot of distraction. So you've got a prop up here in front and an actor, you're being distracted over here, and the real actor, the real scare is over here. They do a lot of that here. Here's a camping scene, for example, to give you an idea. And there's a little bit of a mass scene coming up right now too that was interesting here. You can see kind of this spectral figure, and there's this horned beast up here with a cross and that kind of thing. One of the things that was really cool about this one is the creek. As you walked by the creek, the very first time we went there was a body halfway in and out of the creek. And there was a skeleton. The body was holding on to the skeleton. And as we walked by, This was a live actor. We thought it was a prop. Live actor picks up the skeleton and wades back into the creek and walks into the middle of the creek waving his skeleton at us.
Oh, wow.
Quite a surprise. So they really used the creek very well. And when we first passed by, we thought it was just a prop that was laying there. So it was really well done. Now we get the scare factor. Now this is subjective. Okay, everybody has different levels of scare tolerance. Some people are 1 out of 10 on the scare factor scale. They don't. A clown looks at them and they cry. You know, that kind of thing. Yes, Laura's niece is famous for that. She wants to see clowns, but when they walk by, then she cries.
Yes.
And this is at Great America, so it's really kind of interesting. But others see scares differently. So some people want to see really intense, in-your-face stuff. Other people don't want to see that. They're frightened. So it all depends. But when we talk about it, we don't necessarily mean intensity. We also talk about creepiness. And creepiness doesn't even involve the actors necessarily. It could be the set design, it could be the atmosphere. We've been in empty rooms in haunts that have been creepier than rooms full of actors, for example. So, one thing though we will say, if a haunt bills itself as scary, obviously that sets your expectations. If they say that they're the scariest haunt in the nation, then you're thinking, well, maybe they are. Or maybe they should be, because that's what they say. All right, our first example of the creepiness / scare factor is Evil Intentions. Evil Intentions is a professional haunt. It's in Elgin, Illinois. It's held in an abandoned casket factory. Okay, so right there, you've got creepiness just because of where it's at. And in addition to that, down here is the entrance. The entrance is way down there. Normally, this is not outside. This is a newer addition. It's on a side street. And if you go there and there aren't a lot of people there, it's very quiet. You don't really know where the entrance is, especially if it's the first time you've been there. Not a lot of signage pointing this way. So just walking along here unnerves you just a little bit. And they make very effective use of the inside too, because this is an intense haunt. This is an in-your-face haunt. Their actors are into it, very intense. But also, they use the natural environment. So for example, you're in an abandoned part of this casket factory and you're left alone. There's a sense of foreboding that there may be an actor coming to get you. You hear them off in the distance, or maybe you'll see them above you. Sometimes they just dangle their hair down in front of you, that kind of thing. So it's creepy because of that. It's because of what they don't do. And there's even one room in here. It's a black mass type of room when you walk in. You walk in and it's a 1930s funeral parlor at first. And there's nobody there. Then you go into this other room and it's sort of this black mass setting. And there are hooded figures, full-size figures that you have to walk through. And every time we've been there, not a single one of them has been real. But every single time we've been in that room, we were looking over our shoulders wondering whether or not one of those was real. And it's really good because we've been to a lot of haunts over the years. And we probably do maybe 40 or 50 professional ones every season. So we see a lot of this stuff. So when we get that chill and we feel that, it's pretty effective. It's good. It's something you remember. I'll remember that too. Devil's Crypt. Devil's Crypt is a haunt formerly known as Cicero Town Hall of Horrors because it's in the town of Cicero and it's in the town hall. So it's called Devil's Crypt now. And one thing that's interesting about Devil's Crypt, I apologize for no pictures because obviously no pictures in professional haunts generally, so we don't have them, but Devil's Crypt is in this old town hall, multi-level town hall. It's a building that's probably about 100 years old. They use the basement, they use the natural offices, they even use the prison cells, because they used to keep prisoners there. And it is very well devised so that they leave you alone in large portions of this haunt, and you feel as though somebody's there with you, because the smells, the feelings that you have, the natural light that's in there, or the lack of natural light that's in there, is combined with what they do. Very well done. And finally, Realm of Terror. This is a haunt that's out in Round Lake Beach, Illinois. It's held at a family fun center. And sometimes when you go to haunts at family fun centers, you think, man, what's it going to be? It's like a carnival haunt. But Realm of Terror is a little bit different than that. Realm of Terror is a pretty intense haunt. It's a theme of a sort of an experiment that went wrong. You're underground, the gas leaks out or something, everybody goes crazy that day. A lot of twisty, turning corridors in there, narrow corridors, so you're always walking very close to the live actors, whether you want to or not. They're right there. And when you're turning, they have effective ways of having actors come out from under tables or down from the ceiling. They hang on chains. They do all sorts of weird things to kind of unnerve you. it was much better than what we expected when we went there, but the scare factor, especially for people not expecting something like that, is pretty good. Wouldn't you say?
Yes, I agree.
All right, rating criteria. That's what I'm talking about. Actor enthusiasm, okay? Again, this applies mostly to bigger home haunts because obviously yard displays don't really have a lot of actors. Enthusiasm really makes a difference, and one of the things that really makes a difference is the size of the actors. Not every haunt has huge, hulking, scary actors that are 7 feet tall. A lot of haunts, especially the local haunts, have younger kids, sometimes grammar school age, 8, 9, 10, 11 years old. They're not as imposing. So if a kid jumps out and says boo and he comes up to hear on you, you're not necessarily terrified. So the enthusiasm really makes a difference. In other words, what if that little kid was just creepy and looked at you?
Right. We've seen a lot of creepy children.
Creepy children,
Yes,
yes,
creepy
a lot of
children.
creepy
It's
children.
very effective.
And some of them in haunts too, as a matter of fact. No, but when we see the young actors and they come up to us and sometimes they just stare at you, or they follow you, or they can crawl under places where you never can get an adult to go, for example. That kind of thing is very creative. The other thing that's important, we alluded to this earlier, is staying in character throughout. Obviously, breaking character in the middle of a haunt is really going to take people out of the action. And we've experienced that too, where the person jumps out in the initial scare and then they start chatting with people. You know, okay. I mean, we don't mind it as much, but it does detract from the haunt experience if you're looking at it that way. And then, of course, a lack of repetitive acting style from each actor. So in other words, vary that acting style a bit. Okay? And we understand haunt actors aren't necessarily professional actors. That's not what we mean. We're not looking for Shakespeare. We're not looking for some professional acting experience. We're just looking for something other than the same thing every time we go into a different room. So that's something that, example of this, Amherst Asylum. Now this is a haunt right here that fooled us. And I'll tell you why. It fooled us for a couple of reasons. One of them is because it's what? An asylum.
It's an asylum.
That's right. So when we hear asylum, we think everybody's going to be crazy and screaming because
Just
that's
screaming at you, yes.
what you see in asylum. The other thing is, when this haunt first started up, the very first year, it was pricier than other haunts in the area. And it billed itself, of course, as the most intense, the most scary, the scariest haunt you'll ever see. So we thought to ourselves, well, it's a first-year haunt, and they're billing themselves that way. I don't know if we really even want to go. And so we didn't. We actually skipped it for a couple of years. But then one year we decided to go. And I have to say, we were mistaken.
Yes.
We were mistaken. Because, although it is an asylum, they really do a good job of having the actors act as though they live there and you're just visiting, and they don't care if you're there or not.
Right.
They do their own thing.
Yes.
There
They're
are
all
some
different.
screamy, shouty
They're all
ones,
different.
but there are giggly ones. There are ones that touch you a little bit because they can touch you out here in Indiana, so we get that. In Illinois, we don't get touched, but out here, if we want to get touched, we go to Valparaiso. So, in any case, they do all sorts of different things. Some of them whisper and they're quiet. They follow you. They do all sorts of odd stuff. I had a guy ask me if he could touch my stubble on my face, and then he put his cheek against me and did it. So I wasn't expecting that. Okay, not that I was pleased per se, but it certainly is memorable. Okay, so Amherst Asylum is very well done because of the actor enthusiasm. Hairraiser. Now this is an example of something else. This is a local haunt in Chicago, North Side. It's at a church called St. Thecla's, and it's younger kids, mostly under high school age. The full name of this haunt is Hairraiser Haunted Scenes, and that's because there's no single theme through this haunt. It's individual scenes that the kids come up with. Okay? So it's the entire basement of the school and the church, and you could see a wide variety of themes. So there was a Walking Dead theme last year, but it was out in the middle of a campground. They actually built a full-size Airstream type of camper in there, which is really interesting. They have jungle scenes, mine scenes, guys in gorilla suits, giant spiders, all sorts of crazy stuff. And it's younger kids. And the point about that is they're all very into what they do. Okay? Do we walk in there and get scared? No. But again, we're not expecting that. We're expecting to be entertained, to have a nice time. And that's really what it's all about. And they do a good job with that. I want to point out one other thing while I'm saying all this. Because you see these on here, this does not mean that these are the best haunts out there or the ones that are our favorites or anything. There are so many that we see. And there are very few that we don't like. Okay? This could go on all weekend if we were to do stuff like that. But I just want to point out examples of the characteristics. And these are the ones that come to the top of the mountain. So the Nephilim. The Nephilim is a yard display in Burbank, Illinois. It's a yard display with a very small little uncovered walkthrough, so we really consider it more of a yard display than a home haunt. But you can see here they've got the house decorated in neon colors that glow at night. They've got movies that they show up here.
Yeah, the roof.
Okay, there's a walkthrough on the sidewalk over here as well that you don't see. But what really makes this haunt are the actors. It's a family affair. It's two families, they live on either side of one another. And there are dozens, at least 2 dozen, sometimes 3 dozen actors in this haunt of all sizes. Little kids from 7 years old all the way up to adults. Okay? And they stay in character the entire time. They never break character. Even the little kids, they come up behind you and they're really creepy and they just look at you and stare at you and they never break character, which is really neat to see. It's really cool. And one of the big attractions of this particular one in terms of acting is this guy right here. This is Ghost Rider. And this is part of their acting crew, just a few. Our picture didn't even catch half of the people. Ghost Rider rides this motorcycle through the display, through the yard display.
It's all lit up.
It's lit up at night, and you often will find them chasing after screaming people down the street as you're pulling up to the haunt. You see this quite often. Okay, and they don't let up either. If some people we've seen, they're on sort of a T intersection. Okay, we see people coming this way, and they're on this part of the haunt. People pull up over here, they see the people come running, and they just back away. They just leave. They don't even get out of their car. So it makes for a fun experience at the point. So, and they're really enthusiastic. Okay, and now uniqueness. Uniqueness, again, generally many haunts have a lot of similarities, as you know. Especially professional haunts, even yard displays and such. A lot of them have the same props and themes and sets, and that's not a bad thing. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that. There's not an infinite amount of sets and props that you can use in a haunt. It is funny though sometimes when we go through haunts, especially professional ones, in a certain year we'll say, oh, that must be the hot prop this year because we've seen it in every single haunt this year, but we haven't seen it in years previous. So we see that, but that's cool though because sometimes you see really neat props and you want to see them again. But every now and then you'll see something that's unique, a spin on something you see all the time. Like Michael Myers, Laura's favorite.
Yeah, he's
Okay.
my favorite.
Tell them about Michael Myers.
We've seen variations. We've seen him as a janitor with a mop, and then we've also seen him as a DJ.
Yeah.
So different variations on a character.
Yeah, so Laura loves to see Michael Myers
Yes,
and
I
she
do.
hates to see Michael Myers at the
Right.
same
He's
time.
like the one that scares me, and I don't. Yeah, that's what I
You get scared all the time.
I didn't know.
No. Laura's good bait. I put her right in front when we walk in.
Right.
We go right toward her. So, anyway, it's something that you don't see anywhere else necessarily. An example of this is a yard display in Oak Lawn. It's called Spirits on Spro. Now the theme of this one is famous movie characters / horror characters. Okay. They have life-size figures all through the backyard, all these characters. But it's more than just a yard display. It's also interactive. There's an app. When you get there, you can download an app on your phone and play a game with these figures. Okay? And it's an identification game. Can you guess which ones they are? There are informational placards. There's also
Trivia. But usually humorous trivia.
Yeah, humorous
about them.
trivia,
Yes,
exactly.
about the characters.
there's also sound bites for each of the characters. So you'll see various things. And in addition to the standard stock characters that you see a lot of, like Michael Myers, etc., you see characters that you don't see anywhere else. For example, this guy, and everybody knows who that is. Here's John. That's right, Jack Nicholson from The Shining, complete with the hotel key right there, right next to his axe, okay, and red rum right there as well. And we got Ash from The Evil Dead back there too. But this is the first time we actually saw a life-size Jack Nicholson from The Shining. Okay, and then of course there's this guy, not this guy, but this guy. No, not him. We see him all the time. This is Michael Myers. This guy right here. And what is different about him?
That is Lon Chaney Jr. portraying the mummy in the sequels.
So it's not
Yes,
your typical
it's
Boris
not-
Karloff?
It's not Boris Karloff, it's Lon Chaney Jr.
And little stuff like that makes an impact, at least from our perspective, because we hardly ever see any Universal monsters anyway. But to see a Lon Chaney instead of a Boris Karloff is interesting. We also have other Universals at this particular one, like the Invisible Man. He may be a little hard to see, but he's there. Terrible, that's my terrible joke. And then you've even got Mother and Norman as Mother over here from the Bates Motel. And then for fans of local horror hosts, we even have this guy. Life-size Svengoolie with the rubber chicken. So that's Spirits on Spro. There are at least 60 figures or so, life-size figures. There's even Jaws in there. Cool. even in Charleston. So it's kind of neat. It's fun for the kids. They enjoy it. This is another one that's unique too. House of Hammer Horror. Now this one's out in St. John, Indiana. It was in Chicago, Illinois, on the south side of Chicago for 32 years before it moved out to St. John. So it's been going on in one form or another for 32 years. And as the name implies, it's all about Hammer movies. Okay? Which we can honestly say in all of our times that we've been to haunts of any type, we've never ever seen Hammer in haunts. Not even a Christopher Lee figure or something like that. And this is nothing but Hammer all the time. And it changes every year. So, for example, you'll see Peter Cushing and Kiwi Kingston as the Frankenstein monster in The Evil of Frankenstein. That's in the front
And
window.
Peter Cushing is eerily, he looks very real.
Yes.
It's
This
like-
is actually
Yes.
Grand Moff Tarkin from Star Wars modified into Peter Cushing as Baron Frankenstein. But done very well.
Yeah.
And here is a new addition. This is Christopher Lee as Dracula from Dracula, Prince of Darkness. Okay, and over here is a carriage. This is a hand-built carriage that you don't see. And back there is one of the brides of Dracula. And this little graveyard that you see in the background here has a Peter Cushing tombstone. It has a Christopher Lee tombstone. Well, it will have as of this year. And speaking of Christopher Lee from The Curse of Frankenstein. Frankenstein monster hanging from the scaffold. Curse of Frankenstein. And then, around the corner, we even have one of Laura's favorites, this guy right here.
Yeah, Oliver Reed, Curse of the Werewolf.
That's right, Oliver Reed is The Curse of the Werewolf. And there are some hay bales down here. There's some modern Hammer horror too. There's the woman in black, she's up in the window. And we've seen, for example, Christopher Lee as the Mummy. We've seen things from Vampire Circus, the Vampire Lovers, all sorts of different themes all the time. Always something to see there. And finally, for uniqueness, we've got Tour of Terror. Now this is a professional haunt. This is out in Hobart, Indiana. And what's unique about this, they use their natural environment very well, very, very well. This is actually what?
An abandoned 19 missile base.
That's right. This
That's
is
where it takes place, that's where it's at, it's very creepy.
it's in the middle of nowhere.
Yes.
This is a guard shack, okay, and the picture is dark because there's nothing there, it's just darkness. You drive in the middle of nowhere and you pull through this gate, and this is what you see before you get to the haunt. It almost looks as though there's no one there. This was an actual Nike missile base that closed down in the late 60s. And they use it now as a paintball area, but during the Halloween season they use it as a haunted tour. And it's a guided tour with guys dressed up like military figures. And they lead you around the trails, but they also take you to the original buildings that were built in the 1940s. And these are concrete bunkers. They're still there. They're wet. They're old. They smell. They have old lights, the old hanging lights from the 1940s. And what they do, there are actors, but they're few and far between, and that's purposely that way. They leave you in these rooms and they close the door. And they let your imagination kind of go. Because you have to find the way out. Now, it's not dark or anything. You can see. There's light. But just when you're walking around there, you're expecting something that may come and it may not. So there's a good mix of outdoor and indoor here. And to be honest, when we first went here, we thought, we don't know how good this is going to be. Because as we talked about earlier, haunts that tell a lot of stories instead of kind of getting into it, sometimes they're good and sometimes they're bad. But we have to say that this one is actually very effective in what they do. Laura wanted to leave, which is...
Yeah, I couldn't wait to get out of there. And normally I don't feel that way, but I was actually,
All right, and finally, the paid portion of it, value for the month. Is it worth it? Really, this is subjective. I mean, it's based on what you expect or what you like. Okay, so we can't say that everybody's going to say that this is a good value for the money. If you go to one haunt a year and you pay $30 and you have a good time that night, it was good value for you. You liked it. Nothing wrong with it. But on the other hand, if you, let's say, buy VIP tickets and you pay $55 and you get a haunt that's really kind of disappointing, you're not really happy with that, per se. But every haunt is different. We will say, though, that higher cost does not necessarily equate to longer length or better quality. We've been to haunts that have been $3, $5, $7, that are 15 or 17 minutes long. Conversely, we've been to $25 haunts that are 10 minutes long. So it really varies. There's no guarantee. Lower cost, on the other hand, does not imply lower quality at all. And that's one thing that we try to think about when we go to haunts. Value really depends on the experience. Really, the bottom line is, did we enjoy it? That's the bottom line question that anyone can ask of any haunt. Did you enjoy it? Did you have a good time? That's what it's about. Don't miss out on any haunts because you think cheaper is low quality, because it's not really the case. We find that some of these smaller haunts have a lot of heart. A couple examples of that, Nightmare on Leamington. Now this is a haunt. It's held in Chicago. It's in a school, actually a church. It's held on one weekend per season. It's in a little school, very simple sets. In fact, they had garbage bags for walls. It was sort of an S-shaped type of winding thing, and in between were these garbage bags. And it was $3. So when we first saw it, our first thought was, you know, do we really want to go? How good is it going to be? Can we fit it into the schedule to go to this? Is it going to be great or not? But we thought we'd go. And I have to say, very well done. Because those garbage bag walls were deceptive. They had corridors in between them, which allowed actors that we had seen in one room to sneak through this line in between the garbage bags and appear in front of the next room. So actors that you thought you were finished with, here they are again. Good use of resources for their limited number of actors, and also a lot of actors were very enthusiastic. So for $3, can't beat it.
Right.
Something like that. Another example is St. Sim's Haunted Attic. This is in Chicago, St. Symphoros School. It's a haunted attic, and it's only held one weekend a year. It's a small school haunt. It uses existing rooms, and it's $5. The same thing applies. One thing that's really cool about this, last year they had a theme where you walk through certain rooms and there's a video screen playing some scene from some movie, and then you see the actual character from that movie.
Right.
But they had something, again, that we've never seen in any haunt, really effective, and that was...
The two little girls from The Shining.
Oh,
They
yeah.
had them like on the projector, they had them on there on the screen, and then you walk, and there they are, two little girls dressed, they're standing there, and you had to go, they're on the stairs, and you had to go past them. But that was just so unique, it's something you don't see.
Exactly. So we walked in, and the stairs were to the left, and nobody sees the stairs because there's a video screen right here with a still of those two little girls, those great little girls from The Shining. And then when we turn to the left, there they are. Nicely done. I mean, they didn't have to say anything. It was really something memorable. And home haunts. Home haunts are a good value because most of them are free. Home haunts, don't let the fact that they're in somebody's house or on somebody's property fool you. A lot of these home haunts really put a lot of stuff into them. I'll give you a few examples later on, but home haunts of any type are good because A, they can be multi-room. Some of them are on the level of pay haunts, they really are.
Yes.
We're not talking big conglomerate professional haunts, but things like a JC's haunt or something like that, they're definitely on that level. They're short but sweet, although some of them are longer. We've been to home haunts that have been almost 20 minutes long, as a matter of fact. That's a long time for a haunt. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it is. And most of them are free. Some of them will ask for donations, but it's not required. Some examples, we've got Agony Home Haunt out in Joliet, Agony Haunted House. This is a walkthrough in the front yard, on the front porch of this old house, giant house, and a purpose-built structure in the whole front yard. They even have a vortex tunnel, one of those spinning vortex tunnels. Yeah, it's got a home haunt. It's really quite good. That's Agony in Joliet. Another one, it's a home-built vortex tunnel.
Oh, really? Wow.
Dark Shadows. This is out in Orland Hills. Now, we like it just because of the name.
Yeah.
But is in Orland Hills, Illinois. This is a garage. The home haunt's in the garage. And despite the fact that it's in a garage, it's about a 5-room haunt. Now, it's not very long. It's maybe 3 or 4 minutes. But they have live actors in there. They have a variety of sets. They even have a jungle set in there with a bridge and mist and all of this kind of thing that you walk over. It's just an example of the value you can get. If you want a fun night, you don't want to spend a lot of money, home haunts. And another one, the late lamented, this one, the guy who runs this haunt, he says he's never going to come back every year, but then he does. It's called Nightmare on Cronin in Justice, Illinois. And this is part of their purpose-built structure where they have the haunt, where they host it. It's designed by a guy who's an artist, and he does all sorts of the paintings. And so when you go inside, all the walls are painted with forest scapes and all this. And they also use the natural environment, the front yard. They take branches from the trees and dirt, and they put it inside the haunt, and they make jungle scenes and all that kind of thing. Interesting, nice, and fun. All right, and finally, now that we talked about our criteria, we're going to get to a few of our favorites of all 3 types: yard displays, home haunts, etc. So first up, yard displays. And again, before I get to these, I just want to mention that just because we're pointing these out does not mean that they are our only favorites or ones that are better than anybody else. I just want to make a point of that because we like them all. Except for Laura, she only likes about a third, but no, I kid. Laura's a tough customer.
No.
Thanatophobia Land. Maybe some of you are familiar with this one. This one's out in Lockport, Illinois. This is a yard display. And it's a yard display that's in the front yard, the side yard, the backyard, the garage, and they even have 3 or 4 hearses on the property. So for hearse fans, they have a little bit of everything. Okay. The front yard is this. The front yard consists of a crypt and this backdrop here, which has sort of spectral things floating on it too. You don't see it in the picture, but they appear and disappear. And all of these graves here, these are all famous people who have horror connections along there. So you'll see Alfred Hitchcock, you'll see obviously Boris Karloff, Bela Lugosi, but you even see people like Grandpa Munster, Al Lewis, okay, or Elizabeth Montgomery from Bewitched. You'll see that. And when you go around the side, there's a list of plaques, and every one of the plaques explains about all of these people. Gives you a little biography, things they've been in, year of death, etc. And then you walk around to the back, and there's much more back there. You pass a couple of hearses. This is the garage.
Oh my goodness.
And this is just part of the garage. Okay, this is a Victorian/Edwardian wake scene. And one thing that's cool about this is not only is it set up as a house would have been at that time for a home wake, but every one of these props that you see here, except for the ones that are obvious haunt props that you can buy, every one of these has some kind of story. And the owner will tell you. And it's detailed down to the period, down to the matchboxes that are on the tables. So if it doesn't fit with this period, it's not there. It's really interesting. You wouldn't know that at a glance, but the owners will share that with you, and it's really interesting. And of course, what would a Victorian wake be without a creepy Victorian coffin? Okay, this is a wicker coffin right here. Around the turn of the century era with a creepy old lady in it. And that's scary, and there's light in there too. Okay? I don't even like looking at the picture. Yeah, they have an organ type of thing, type of music. So, and in addition, in the backyard, they have a lot of things like this, where in the background they have real live animal specimens. Well, they're not live anymore, but they were animal specimens in the background. And there's this elaborate display in the background too, of which this creepy doll is a part, but there's more to the left and to the right. But they even have pictures of scientists like Nikola Tesla, for example, in the background. Okay, so there's a lot to see. Another yard display we really like is Dark and the Silent. Now this was in Joliet. I'm not sure where it will be located this year. Maybe Manuka. I know they moved to a new residence, but this was something that was really good. Good attention to detail here. For example, this is part of their garage. Okay, this is the garage, and this floor and these walls are all hand painted. Okay, so this is not the actual floor of the garage. That's all designed that way, although it looks that way. And everything here, all of these were written, and they're panels that are over the garage panels. This girl is animated, she moves, and she's obviously some kind of sight patient. And every one of these props here is, we're told, is authentic from a mental institution that closed down in the 1950s or so. That's what we've heard. Now, of course, anybody can tell a story, but it's still neat to see period pieces. In addition to that, there's a small walkthrough in the garage. No actors or anything like that, but it's got a clown theme. Okay. And the pictures obviously don't do it justice, but these spotlights go all around you when you're in there. So you're surrounded by these spots that move. The clowns move, or at least we think they do. There's some jangly noises, kind of like weird noises in there. And even in the background, there are things with props. Like there's like this clawed hand and sort of like a skeleton of a mermaid, quote unquote, like things you'd see in a funhouse. That kind of thing, like a display when you walk through there. Kind of neat. And then also on the other side of the yard, there's this. There's a crypt. So we've got this crypt, and there are 2 real coffins over here. Obviously this guy here. And then there's this front door. This is the front door of the residence. And they have one of those doors with the video where the zombie comes up and hits it. And this is actuated, and it shakes and all of that. Well, what we really like is this cross that comes from the cemetery. They've got a green light on it. It shines there, so you see that when you're farther away. You see that it's actually a cross reflection. Now here's one that is more tongue-in-cheek. This is fun for the whole family right here. Count Kumhada's Haunted House in Joliet. Now this one, almost everything here is handmade by the guy who owns the property. And there's some creative things that you don't normally see at haunts necessarily. So in the front yard, we've got things like this tombstone here for Jonathan Fripp, Barnabas Collins of Dark Shadows fame, with a little substance there that we believe is blood dripping from it. And then around the back, we've got this guy. He's a fixture. Okay, he's a skeletal bartender. And he moves and he talks, and there are actual sound bites. He says all sorts of crazy things. He's animated. And back here, every one of these liquor bottles has some sort of horror connection. So if you read them really closely, they have things like Sven vodka for
Oh,
and such like that. And then we have these guys, the deadbeats. Boom, boom. That's a joke right there, these deadbeats. Further in, we've got more universal-related things and horror-related things. So obviously Boris Karloff as the Frankenstein monster in front of Mary Shelley's tombstone and his own tombstone. Then we have Bela Lugosi, his visage right there. And even in the background, for those fans of Satan, we've got Aleister Crowley, the founder of the Church of Satan. We've got his tombstone over there too. Then, in addition, there's some of this stuff, which we've never seen at any other haunt. We've got Mars Attacks coming out of the bathroom stall. We even have Audrey 2 from Little Shop of Horrors. And I will mention that these move and there are sound effects for all of them. So there are sound bites from the movie. You hear Audrey say, "Feed me!" Okay, you got that, and the guy from Mars Attacks. And then there's this little girl. This is actually a little girl, they call her the Screamer, I believe. When you walk up to her, she's got a tricycle, and her head is up. Okay, you see her long hair.
She's in the back,
Exactly.
tricycle.
And when you get close enough, this is what happens to her head.
Her
She
head
turns
flips
around and she
back.
screams at you.
She screams.
So some of the clever stuff here. You see a lot of interesting things here. All right, home haunts. Some favorite home haunts that we have here. First one up is the haunted garage. Some of you may have a haunted garage, I don't know, but this one is themed as a garage. It's one of those haunts that we thought at first, how good is this going to be? Somebody's holding it in their garage, right? But it's interesting, and it's interesting for a couple of reasons. This is part of the front, the standard display. The garage is around the back, you don't see it. One of the things they have out in front, they have these games that you can play. There's sort of a hostess, she comes out and she offers you refreshment. You can play games and all that if you want to, but the real show's in the back. It's a backyard walkthrough, and it's got props in the backyard. There's a walkthrough with through the yard with a guide, and then there's the garage, which is, of course, the theme, the haunted garage. But what really gets us about this one is the actors. This is a family affair. He's not one of the actors, he's just there, but I like this this actual fire hazard that they have going on in the backyard. He's not close to anything. But in any case, the actors really make this. It's a family affair, and everybody from the little kids to the neighbors, everybody gets involved. Especially this guy right here, okay? This guy, I'll tell you a little story. First time we went to the haunted garage, we walk in the back, and we hear, there's a loudspeaker system, okay, hidden loudspeaker system. So as we're walking through, we're hearing all these things like, we don't know what anybody's saying. It's just this sort of weird demonic voice, okay? We get in the garage, and we're thinking, where's this voice coming from? Well, it's this guy, DJ Mike Myers.
He's got a
okay?
microphone.
Here he is. He's got his mixing board, he's got his microphone, and he's DJing, and he's doing all the sound effects. So it's the only haunt we know that has Mike Myers as a DJ in the haunt. So it's tongue-in-cheek, okay? Some of these guys are in the haunt, and there are even more, too. It's fun, and it's free. It's one of those things, little time to kill, it's fun. Wicked Walkthrough. This one's in Joliet. This is more geared towards younger kids, but it's really enjoyable to see for a lot of reasons. This is a walkthrough in a garage in Joliet, and this is the outside of the garage. Okay, this is the outside. It's all lit up at night. It even has nice attention to detail. Here we have Henry Hull from Werewolf of London, Universal movie, and we've got some other related signs out there as well. When you get in the garage, it's a mixture of the colorful and sort of the more traditional haunted house. And it's a small garage, but it's done quite well. So there are things like gypsy fortune tellers in there. There are disembodied hands and cases that move, things that jangle, giant spiders, all of this. But there's also the Frankenstein monster, and he's right underneath a picture of the original Frankenstein monster there, Boris Karloff, next to Bela Lugosi as the original Dracula. So you see this life-size when you walk in there. And the first portion of it is slightly different than the second portion. The second portion is more colorful. It becomes more of like a fun house. What it reminds me of are those dark rides in the 1970s and 80s when you went to a carnival and you saw these sort of funhouse / 3D things. All of these walls and props and things, some of the props are not handmade, but all the walls are hand designed. The guy who runs this property is a sign painter by trade, so he does all of this on his own. It glows in the dark, it's whimsical, it's fun for the kids too. So there are cute things to see, but there are also slightly creepy things to see as well. Like these two guys right here, and then also, as you're leaving, you've got this funny looking ghost, and then you've got this witch/creature that comes out at you, and there's like a fan that blows, motion-activated fan, so you get these tendrils in your face as you're leaving, you know, that kind of thing. And there's also nice attention to detail. You've got potions and that kind of thing like that in the garage. And the final one, as far as home hunts go, is this one, West Adams Spook Trail. This is out in Manteno, Illinois. This is a haunt that is in the backyard of a person's property, and they have at least 20 different individual scenes in there. And every single one of the scenes features hand-created props that move in one way or another. A lot of them recreate movie scenes, but other ones recreate more generic things, like giant spiders or demons that jump out at you and such, okay? But it's at least 20 scenes, all done by the wife and husband who run this property. This is the entrance to the haunted house in the back, and this is part of the front. It's all around the backyard. And it's much bigger than it appears to be. A couple of things that we see in there, for example, would be here. Here's Freddy from Nightmare on Elm Street. In the picture, of course, you can see his arm is blurred because his claw is scraping against this railing. And there's a girl on the bed over here. So this is what you see as far as that prop goes. And then over here, we've got Laura's favorite guy, Michael Myers. And you can see he's stabbing this woman, as Michael Myers does. But who's this guy over here?
Bob from the original Halloween. The guy who stabs to the wall.
That's right. So this is the guy in the kitchen where Michael Myers, he goes to get a beer, and Michael Myers stabs him and impales him on the kitchen and takes a look at him. That's when he gets the sheet. Okay? This is the only haunt we've ever seen where Bob is a feature.
Right.
Not that that makes or breaks a haunt, but it's kind of cool. It's something different. And again, as you go through this, it winds through the entire yard. You see more and more of these little tableaus. So you've got things that are like this woman, this giant spider moves and crawls up onto this woman as you're walking by. There's Billy from Saw, he comes out. As I said, there are witches, there are vampires, there are werewolves, all sorts of stuff in this. And then, Resurrection Graveyard. Resurrection Graveyard, one of the very first home haunts we ever went to. And we have to say that this haunt here is, if we didn't know it was a home haunt, it could easily be on the level of a professional haunt. It's not at all what you'd expect from a home haunt.
It's very intense.
Very intense. This is not family friendly at all. People are in your face all the time.
Right.
It's in Evergreen Park, and it's on a very small property. It's held on the driveway, and a little bit towards the back, but it's not a very big property. And it's deceptive because the way they lay out the maze, there are multiple rooms in this maze, in this haunt. There are church scenes, there are swamp scenes, places we have to crawl through. There's all sorts of stuff in here, and a bunch of actors, line actors. They have live actors out in line, like this nurse right here with this syringe in her chest right there, and she's just line entertainment. Okay? As you can see, the lines get quite busy too. That's one thing about home haunts. Home haunts can get as busy as professional haunts too. Okay? And the actors really make this one because they are intense, and there are an awful lot of them. For example, we've got this priest here. He reads you the rules in the beginning. Basically tells you you're doomed, which, as everybody knows, that's what happens when you go to a haunted house. We've got this nurse here. She's got a syringe in her eye too that you don't see. And this crazy guy, you'll see him later on as well. But we also have characters like, for example, my slideshows. There we go. All right. This guy here, he gets me every year for some reason. He's a scarecrow. I always think he's a prop, but he isn't. And this girl, she always plays a variation of some sort of marionette. Last year she had a key in her back and a giant pair of scissors in her hand. So she was wound up and she was after you with the scissors. And here's that guy, the mental patient from the last slide. There he is, hanging on the wall.
He's crawling on the wall, yeah.
They do that kind of thing. These are the kind of things that you see in pay haunts, but here it is on a home haunt level. This dentist here, these are all dental tools in his glove. So you see a lot of decapitations in there. You see partial bodies. You see things not family friendly, especially because of this guy. This is Squiggles the clown. Squiggles, we suspect he's always like this, whether it's Halloween or not.
Right.
Okay? Because he never breaks character no matter where he's at. Okay? He's intense. He's in the haunt. He's in and out of the haunt. He's in the line. People just want to get away from him, and you just can't. So, and finally we come to pay haunts. Some of our favorite pay haunts. The ones that come to mind when people say, hey, give me a haunt. I want to go to a haunt today. Here's one of them, Basement of the Dead. This is out in Aurora. And as the name implies, it's in a basement. It is actually two haunts. It is the basement part, and then there's also a part called Shattered, which is in 3D. Now this is a haunt. It's not really as long as other haunts, it's maybe 13, 14 minutes, but it seems longer. The way it's laid out, they have it set up so that when you're walking through and you hit an actor over here, you may pass that actor about 4 different times. The actor doesn't move, you do, but the actor can approach you from different angles all the time. It's very effective in terms of the way they set up their actors. And the other thing is that they do, every single one of their actors in there has full prosthetic makeup on or a mask, like full costume. So you won't see just like a t-shirt and some black makeup on their eyes or something. It's all full prosthetic. Similar to this guy, he's out in the line there, but you see some really weird things. And the actors are varied. Some of them scream at you, but then there are the creepy ones who just grunt at you. I think one year we went there, a guy had a pair of scissors and he just kept scraping them along the ground, and we saw him through the whole haunt. And he would just grunt, make these weird sounds. And it's fun. It's interesting because the performance is interactive, but they're not in your face in an annoying sort of way. And as I mentioned, this haunt seems longer than it is, Basement of the Dead. I apologize for lack of pictures, but as you know, no pictures in the professional haunts. Devil's Crypt we talked about earlier, but I'll talk about it again, precisely because of the way this is done. This is in the old Cicero Town Hall. This is the building in the background here. It's multi-level. Last year they did it a little bit differently. They started you out in the basement. And in the basement, the very first thing you see is a long corridor like this, long straight corridor. And down on either side are doors. And they're real doors, they're not prop doors. These are actual real doors. And there's one light that's on, slightly ahead of it. And the way they had it set up is when you walked under that light, that would be the only illumination in the whole corridor. Until you walked out of that light and the next light would come on. But then that one would go out.
Wow.
So as you're walking down this hallway, and mind you, there was not a single actor down there.
No, it was foggy and the way it was lit. You were just waiting for someone to jump out at you, but
Yes,
but it
exactly.
didn't happen.
Because it was
So you're
old.
just, yeah, right.
It was decaying,
just-
it was
yes.
old, and that's just the way it looked. And this creepy over-the-shoulder feeling that you had followed you through the whole thing. And they run that theme throughout. And there are a lot of actors in there too, but they spaced them out enough. And for example, there's one area where you're coming down a staircase and there's an entire indoor jungle setting with a full waterfall inside,
Right.
okay, inside this town hall. And it's misty and it's hot and it's sweaty. And there's this demon that comes out on wires, this giant vampiric type of demon with giant wings that comes out at you under a strobe light. And you really don't know what the heck's going on. Lake Hills Haunted House. This is out in St. John, Indiana. This is in an old clubhouse, old golf course clubhouse, Lake Hills Haunted House. The building itself is creepy because it's abandoned and it's old and it's multi-level, multi-floor. This is populated mostly by high school actors, but don't let that fool you because
They're excellent.
they're really into what they do.
Yes.
They're very varied in their performances. There's a lot of quietness and creepiness as opposed to shouty in your face type of activity. And again, this, like the haunt we talked about before, Amherst Asylum, these actors act as though they would do this whether you were there or not, which is really interesting. And it's a nicely done haunt because you're sort of on your own there. You never know when an actor from one room is going to show up in another room. They have a good way of coming out with secret passages and things like that. A lot of period detail in here too. You see a lot of old furniture and such like that. But one of the things that's a highlight of this one for us is the line entertainment, the wait entertainment. And that's because of this guy right here. You can tell that's Michael Myers. And we see him on a lot of haunts, of course. But this guy's a little different because he is there from the minute you pull in the parking lot till the time you leave. He doesn't leave you alone. So if you don't like Mike Myers, you're really not going to be, because as soon as you pull in, he comes up to you and he follows you. Never ever breaks character. Just that creepy sort of, you could say, hey, nice to see you and all that kind of, no, it doesn't matter. He's there. He walks around in line, and when you don't see him, you will eventually. Here he is peeking around, and the ticket booth is over here. Here he is peeking around. And sometimes he'll just stare at people, which is really interesting. When you leave the haunt, there's a cemetery. It's fog and smoke. 9 times out of 10, you want to get out of there because there's, of course, scares at the end. You get out, and you're like, I'm done. No. There he is, silhouetted in the smoke, and he's standing there waiting for you to come to the parking lot because that's where he follows you. And it's not at all unusual to see something like this. This is us trying to leave. Okay, in our car, and there he is. And you never quite know. Like, you know, should we leave or should we? You don't know. Okay, so at Lake Hills, and finally the Massacre. The Massacre is a haunt out in Montgomery, Illinois. And this is a haunt for people who like their haunts a little tongue in cheek. This is a play on humor. It's a funny haunt. It has some scares in there, but all of the characters are just odd in one way or another. And odd in a way that makes you laugh, too.
It's entertaining.
As an example, their mascot is this guy right here. This is Pedo the Clown. Okay? And he loves children, or so he tells us all the time. Pedo the Clown, he doesn't smell very good. But he'll greet you in line, he follows you around, and he's in the haunt too. And one of the things that Laura pointed out makes this haunt very good is
Because the person, he's on the advertisements for this haunt, and he's actually in the haunt. A lot of haunts advertise a character or several characters, you never see him. In this haunt, he's in the haunt, he's all over the place.
in fact, multiple characters that they
Yes.
advertise are in the haunt.
Are in the haunt.
And that's nice to see, because I'm sure everybody's had this experience. You go to the website, you see all these great things, set design, actors. Sometimes they even have these movies that are really frightening and terrifying, and you hardly see any of that in the actual haunt. That does happen from time to time. So this right here, what you see is what you get. And Pedo is amusing, and he's sort of symbolic of the way the characters are. They're tongue-in-cheek in that haunt. They will get in your face, but in a funny way. You're laughing as well as being terrified out of your wits when you go through the massacre. It's also a long haunt. It's about 21, 22 minutes
Excellent
long.
sets.
Elaborate sets. They even have a crashed plane that's half inside of a building. It's a theater facade, and the plane is half inside. All sorts of stuff in there. Massacre out in Montgomery, Illinois. Those are only examples. I just want to give you some quick resources, places to go, that you can kind of get an idea of haunts, and I'm sure you're all familiar with all of these. HauntedIllinois.com, great haunt directory for Illinois. Give you a list of, they have all sorts, hay rides, home haunts, yard displays, everything. Great place to get some resources. They also have professional reviews on there and reviews for visitors, from visitors. Haunted House Chicago, very similar. Illinois Haunted Houses, the same, and they have a home haunt section as well. You can take a look at. There's the Scare Factor. This is an international haunt directory. They have haunts from all over. And of course, our own website, the shameless plug at the very end, horrortours.com. You'll see video reviews and printed reviews for these. And Facebook and Google. Facebook, because a lot of these individual haunts have Facebook pages, and there are groups on there too for haunts. And also Google as well. One thing I will point out that I didn't have a list as far as resources, but it's very interesting, is Chicago Haunt Builders, which I'm sure some of you are familiar with. They're a group where they're a group of haunt enthusiasts, and they have yard displays, etc., around the entire Chicagoland area. When you go to one of their haunts, like Canyon Trail as an example, they'll have a brochure. They'll have a list of all the other haunts. And that's very useful if you want to do home haunts and yard displays. That's really good. That's a great resource. So that's everything that we had to say. I hope that you enjoyed it. Again, it's just an example of some of the things that we find that you like in haunt. Appreciate everybody coming out. It was great. Great to see everybody. I hope you had a good time.